Hello and welcome to a buildingSMART webinar. This webinar is part of the buildingSMART Virtual Summit for Spring 2022. Thank you for joining us today. My name is John Proctor and I will be your moderator. Details of today's webinar are on the screen. This is Building Room Session 1 and we will be having an update on the facilities management projects that are taking place within the building room. First, we will actually hear from Jeff and Ines on FM handover equipment maintenance. And then afterwards, we will hear from Fred and Patrick on the FM and openBIM project. The webinar is scheduled to last for 2 hours with a short question and answer section at the end. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available in the replay section of the event within the next 24 hours. Before I hand over to our speakers, I'd like to remind you that your phone lines will remain muted for the duration of the webinar. If you have any questions or wish to make comments, please use the comments box in the control panel on the right-hand side of the screen. So any questions, please add them into comments. I'd also like to bring to your attention the information that is on the screen now, that buildingSMART is committed to ensuring that participation in the development of standards is unrestricted and that the process for their adoption is transparent, and that standards that are developed do not favour any particular provider but are open, non-binding and accessible to all. Please take note of our antitrust code of conduct. I'd now like to invite Jeff and Ines to turn on their cameras and join us. Hi guys, and I can see you're sharing your slides, so over to you, Jeff.
Great, thank you. Hi, I'm Jeffrey Kloet.
Hello, I'm Ines Arpeitia. Thank you, John.
We're going to talk today another update on what has been known as the facilities maintenance handover equipment, facility management handover equipment maintenance project. And want to update everybody on the turn that it's sort of taken as we've gone on to muster support for the project. And what we've seen is more and more interest from the infrastructure side of things. And so we're sort of looking at a more holistic view and this idea of an asset operations handover rather than just dealing with buildings, which we call facilities management. And so, much of this is based on the same previous, work and the slides that we've shown in the previous summits. But we know there's a few things that have changed. And in talking to you today, what we're trying to do is get people to understand how that scope has changed a little bit, but also still looking for the support to get the sponsorship and get the participants involved so we can move the project forward as an actual standards project. And I think, going back to this idea of facility management or asset operations handover, is that the intent of all this is to take the information that is generated during the project delivery phase, during the design process, during the installation, fabrication, and commissioning process, and then turning it over to the owner and operator for the operations phase, the rest of the life cycle of the building. And, doing it in such a way that the information that is collected is transferred in a meaningful way for the systems that the owner and operator are using. Now, this isn't saying that the data is necessarily wholesalely transferred to the owner where they take complete ownership of it. It's just providing them a necessary subset that they may need from all of the things that have been put together during that project delivery phase that is essential for their operation systems. And, as I said before, we recognize that this is not just about buildings, and the fact that there's more things in common with buildings and horizontal infrastructure than uncommon. I mean, from a data point of view, the differences are somewhat trivial. They're not insignificant, but they're not things that can't be handled within the current frameworks that we're talking about. And the nice thing is that if we look at them all as a singular asset domain, it does make the implementations for software vendors much easier. So, there's lots of ways, as we've mentioned before, with facilities management, that very similar with overall asset management. There's many ways that the data can be used, whether it's maintenance systems or sort of larger scale asset management systems that look at it from a 10,000 meter view and says, hey, what are we looking at in the scope of not just one building, but an entire campus of buildings or an entire set of different assets or a whole entire network of infrastructure. And more and more we're talking about this idea of digital twins. How can we take what's been developed in the design models and in how those design models are revised over the course of building and implementation, and then used in connection with real-time sensors to create this idea of a digital doppelganger for the analog installations. So we're not starting from scratch. As we said before, this has a long legacy, and that legacy started back with IFC 2x3. It started with the idea of the basic FM handover view and COBE, which was FM handover view was the BSI effort. COBE was a US-based effort, essentially looking at how to hand over information for facilities management. And in the process of developing those and implementing them, we've seen a large number of vendors actually step up to the plate and support them. But as usual with many things in standards implementations, there's always room to improve, and there's always ways to look at what's happened in the past, see where there might have been some either failures or shortcomings, and then try to figure out what are the best ways to fix those. And again, there's a lot of information that we've generated in the past. There's a couple of papers that are already been published by BSI that are the first drafts to this idea of lessons learned, and how can we move forward based on what we've experienced over the past 15 years. So how do we move forward? And moving forward is, we started with this idea of FM handover equipment maintenance, as we said before, a singular project really dealing with a specific use case, and at the same time looking at what had been gone before and saying, okay, what worked and what didn't work. And what didn't work was the fact that it was sort of a one size fits all. So the idea is, well, how can we change that dynamic, that methodology, so we can make have more value for that handover. And like I said, not starting from scratch, so we could leverage what had already happened in everybody's previous experiences. And at the same time, and Fred will talk about this after us, is this idea of there's more than just one use case. There's lots of use cases. And so how can we begin to address those other use cases? And so the FM management, the FM and openBIM project is looking at 5 other use cases and defining what those requirements are. Where we'd like to take that is in this next step, as I mentioned before, which is to say a larger scope or envisioning of this, and saying it's about all of asset management or asset operations handover. And how do we capture that data? How do we create a modular framework that is able to accommodate horizontal and vertical domains, and also accommodate lots of different workflows where I don't necessarily need everything that a specification like FM handover or COBE might present, but instead I just want parts of it. Yet it still works and it's still interoperable in the software. And what do we mean by that? So we still have these common contexts that we're dealing with. We're still, talking about how the data exchange and the data requirements are framed in terms of 19650. But we're also, have to look at those other ISO standards that have been developed for facility and asset management. And as we said before, we already have these experiences of these other IDMs and MVDs that have been put forward. So this all started really as a building and airport room effort, where the FM handover equipment maintenance really came out of the building room. The FM and openBIM sort of a combination of the building room and the airport room, but really had a much tighter focus. And in conversations, informal conversations over time, there's been more sort of questions asked from the infrastructure side to say, well, how can we leverage this? We're also talking about, how to get that information into our operations. And so, we're beginning to look at this from a different point of view and saying, hey, how can we move forward with the infrastructure groups? And how many other use cases can we bring to this? And I don't think it stops there. I think the other thing that we recognize is that, when we talk about this handover from project delivery to operations, we also have to involve the contractors, right? Besides the designers, besides the owners, we're also having to involve the construction part of this. So we want that to be, a part of the effort. And, it's possible this expands to other domains too. And, which those domains might they be in the future? We don't know. It all depends on who sees the value in that use case or in this idea, this framework. And so one of the proposals is to say, well, instead of relying on any single room to carry this effort forward, what about having a larger working group that crosses all of these rooms and says, that group can then begin to communicate with each other, can really communicate and foster this type of work that's being done, and gather the resources and gather the participants together to put forth their needs and their requirements and their use cases in the development of this project. And as I said before, the idea is that you want to include as many people who can benefit from handing over this information from the project delivery phase to the operations, and have this group really be the oversight for all of this. And then as more and more use cases pop up and more of these exchanges that need to be defined, that they have that kind of oversight over what's going on and making sure everything remains consistent. So we just want to sort of quickly go through what this looks like now as we look at this new scope. And again, we're looking at this from a modular strategy point of view. If you look at the previous efforts of FM handover and COBE, currently even being used today, their problems is that they are large and monolithic. It's, you have the whole entire specification, and the expectation is that everybody brings all of that information to the table in the project delivery team. And so there's this whole idea of, one size fits all, but in really maybe one size fits nobody. And, how do we bring that forward and say, well, how do we make it so that it's right sized all the time? And so the idea is that you actually have a re-architecture of this strategy, and you make it modular. And the modularity has to deal with this idea of you have a core set of requirements that are always necessary when you're exchanging information from project delivery to the operations. And that it's similar, or if not exactly the same, across those domains. Then where you get into the specificities of what use cases you're trying to solve. So is it equipment maintenance? Is it cleaning? Is it, Is it business catering and kitchen equipment system? What is that particular use case? Or is it more holistic? And you say, well, I do want all of everything, and maybe I can actually put a bunch of modules together to get all of everything. And and then this core has to find, like, what are those best common denominators of what needs to be exchanged every single time. And as Bill East has mentioned in the past, is not every use case, not every business case requires geometry. Sometimes it's just all of the associated data. And so that geometry can be optional. Not every FM or asset management or asset operations system requires geometry, but you still have all of the important data points. Then the modules is where you can become more specific in expressing what the requirements are for the use case. So you really start to break down, well, what is it that you need from all of that information that's been generated in the project delivery phase? What are the exact elements? What are all of these attributes and everything that are needed? But at the same time, what you're trying to do is provide a formatting, a framework that says, well, if something goes into a module, this is the way it should look. This is how it should work. And again, so that you have a consistency between the modules themselves that's consistent with the core, and then it's consistent with the way that it's executed in software. And that way you can have modules that can, be combined with each other, so that you can begin to develop this idea of an interoperable modularity, where you always have the core, but then depending on your use case, you may have one or more modules that are put together to create the resulting data set that you need for your operations. And I think while this may look really complex on one side of it, I think the beauty of it is then you begin to develop an ecosystem of right sizing the information that you need for that handover, right? So you have some owners that are more sophisticated than others. You have some owners that are willing to, dive all the way in and say, well, we want all of it. We want all of this information that you can give. But then you're going to have other owners that are saying, wait, we eventually we may get everything, but right now we want to start on one use case. We want to start and figure out how to do equipment maintenance or how to do space management and work from there. And the same thing with the infrastructure side is looking at particular domains within infrastructure. So, bridges are a good example, and how there might be a bridge inspection module that says, okay, what is the information that we need from the project delivery that allows us to do our automated inspection process? The beauty of this then is that really when you're certifying the implementations of the software, as long as the software can show it can handle the core and maybe one or two different modules, then it should be able to export or to share that information no matter what the modules are and no matter what the combination of modules are. As long as the data is in that source and you want to exchange it and the module is formatted properly, which it should if it follows the rules of the framework, they should get the information they want. No more, no less. It's always right-sized. So we move this idea from this very monolithic one-size-fits-none to a framework in which you get what you need, how you need it, and you're relying only within the specific use cases that you're developing, rather than saying, well, I'm going to get everything and then I'm going to weed out what I don't need, or I'm going to specify the big thing, but then I'm going to qualify all that and saying, well, actually just ignore all of these other tables or just ignore all this other set of data. And within that exchange, I really only want to focus on those particular things, which can be confusing in that BIM execution planning process. And again, there's a whole potential of, bunch of potential of the modules, for both buildings and infrastructure. So, we'll see what happens. And I think everybody should recognize is that each of these does take an amount of effort in order to figure out what the requirements are. Some of those could be based on those previous efforts of FM Handover and COBE, but maybe there's these new ones, especially in infrastructure, that pop up that have unique requirements that we need to have the stakeholders talk about. So as we look at this, is the difference from what we originally posed to what we have now. Really we have the phase 1 being broken down into 3 parts instead of just 2. And part of that is saying, okay, well, what does the core look like? So what does that core set of core specification look like for every exchange? And then what do the modules look like? And, ideally, we'd like to kick this project off with at least 1 module, which we have for equipment maintenance on the building side, and then maybe 1 or 2 modules on the infrastructure side, so that we can prove out that this works across the different domains. And once all of those requirements and the specifications and everything is put together, then we have the review and the publication process. The phases 2 and 3, where we deal with implementation and validation and everything, then occurs next, and that is not within the scope of this particular project. But I think as we finish up this project, or finish up phase 1, then all of the phase 2 begins to come into focus, and the planning for that can happen, and those can be undertaken. So obviously that original scope from FM Handover changes, and a large part of it is based on what we see as the number of modules that may the number of stakeholders and domains that are involved, and how many modules need to be done, but also looking at what can be reused, what only has to be done once, and what are the smaller subsets that do have to be done each and every time. So there's still some work that has to be done on scoping. And the other question is what does that schedule look like? I mean, I'm a firm believer in, if you can do it, move things parallel. So if you can have multiple modules working in development in parallel to each other, then you can maintain this sort of 1-year period of starting the project and getting to the end with however many modules you want done. It does require a lot more effort. It requires more people to be focused. I think on the overall project management side, I don't think it's as it is a bit more effort in making sure everybody is organized and coordinated. But we believe that this is the approach to take, and I think the Open CDE group has proved that you can get a lot done in 12 months. And so what the team looks like is obviously you have the overall sort of management of this, but what we're trying to break this down is into those stakeholder requirements teams, and within those teams, who are all the different stakeholders that are a part of that process, both on project delivery, but also on the facilities maintenance. And with Ines and her team on the outreach team is, making sure that we have enough visibility to the industry and, bringing people into the project, but also keeping everyone up to date on what's happening in the project through time. The technical team really is responsible for dealing with, how do those requirements then get put into a format that is then usable, that is then translated to an IDS, MBDXML, whatever that requirements may be, and then passed along to the vendors for usage. But also at the same time, you have an interplay between the requirements team and the technical team to oversee each other's work or to review each other's work to make sure that everybody understands the other's point of view. So we had scoped out an original budget when we were just looking at buildings, and this is sort of rough costing up front, is saying, well, what would it take per each additional module, and looking at the amount of time that wouldn't need to be spent on a module that would be spent on the core. And then, obviously things like requirements are about the same. You're going to spend the same amount of time developing the requirements. but you're going to spend a lot less time in all of the other areas. There's things that you're going to be able to reuse in terms of the implementation guides, but you still may have some new information that needs to be done for a particular implementation. And then the idea of candidate standard status is, one of the goals of the original project scope was to say, well, we want to move FM handover equipment maintenance to an ISO status. And so how do we get that through the buildingSMART process? And then how do we get to the ISO process? Is that even appropriate? Or do we say, maybe what we do is we put forward the base MVD, this idea of the asset operations handover, as an ISO standard, and then all of the modules then become, buildingSMART standards, national standards, local standards, whatever those may be, and some of them, if necessary, rise to an international standard status, and some may not. And I think that really depends on the stakeholders involved in each of the modular projects. And really, when we look at the effort overall, this is what we're talking about. Some of the things that we talked about in the original project plan, which you can find links to, or at least the presentations before. It's anticipating some in-person meetings, but really what we're trying to be realistic here about how much time that it takes, how much effort that it takes to do each of these projects. And there's a lot of heavy lifting here because there's a lot of formal technical writing and requirements documentation and everything that is necessary to be done, besides all of the volunteer effort by the participants. So what you're seeing here in terms of the budget is strictly what is necessary to pay consultants in order to get the technical work done. Ines, anything further to add?
No, I think everything is clear. I don't know if you have any questions, or we're going to leave them for the end. But
we don't have any questions at the moment. A few comments where people are appreciating the presentation that was being made. So thanks to Kelly, thanks to Edgar. If there are any questions or comments that anyone wishes to make for Jeff or Ines, then please add them into the comments section now. I've got one just coming in, which I'll put on the screen. So Kelly, thank you, Kelly, says, what is the average time requirement for volunteers?
Good question. I think in our original estimate, we were looking at about 20 hours per month for those requirement team members. So the time spent in meetings, the time spent in reviewing materials, if there's further volunteer time to help writing some of these things, then that time might go up. I think the maximum we were looking at was 20 hours per month. Obviously, that might be more heavily loaded on the front end and then a little bit lighter towards the back end. And I think the same thing, if you look at the consultant work, is that, a large part of it is doing some early meeting work and preparation, but then a large part of the consulting work then, is on the preparation of the materials, the official materials that be done. So it sort of balances out overall, but the volunteers are obviously going to spend a lot more time up front generating the requirements.
Thanks, Jeff. I think Kelly's interested in volunteering, but she's asking, could I volunteer if travel is not possible?
Yeah, absolutely. So the travel and everything is really the requirements for the project team to be in any places for the summits and for any in-person meetings. Almost all of this is conducted online now. And if there's a need for hybrid events, we'll have hybrid events. I think, being that we're trying to gather stakeholders from all over the world and from, different domains and things, the majority of this is going to happen online. So that's really not an issue. I think the biggest issue for us right now is finding the stakeholders who want to be the sponsors of the project to fund the project. because until we have that in place, we can't really move forward with the project. And and that's where we're at.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. There are no further comments or questions in the comments area at the moment.
So I have to leave because I have to go start up the technical room soon and get everybody on stage. But Ines will stick around, so if there are any further questions, she can answer those. And like I said, feel free to reach out to either of us, both of us. There is a link to the previous pitch decks. It's a public link. There's a little bit more explanation and more depth of that original scope of the project, sort of more why and how. But again, I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to set this up for success by saying, now we have an opportunity to include infrastructure. So hopefully we can look at how we bring more people into this process, into this particular project.
That's great. Thank you, Jeff. We'll let you go. You're a busy man. You've got to be in nearly 2 places at once.
And we don't want cloning. So
no, not yet. Something for the future. Thanks very much. See you later. Thanks, Ines. If you're able to stay with us, then that will be great. In case of course. Further questions, sure. Or we can take them up to the next presentation. There is a comment that Richard Kelly has added into the comments box, which is directly at Kelly Ewald. Thanks, Kelly, for your comments. And if you want to follow up with Richard directly about the opportunities in the volunteering space, then there is Richard's email. It's also in the comments box. So I'll take that down. I'd like to invite Fred and Patrick to turn on their cameras, and I'll add them into the stream. Hi guys, welcome. Hi Fred. Are we going to be sharing slides from your screen, Fred?
Yes. Thank you, John, for introducing myself and Patrick Wallis. First hand over to Patrick, one of our work group leaders in this project, to introduce himself. Patrick, can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Fred. I'm Pat Wallis. I work with Esri. Formerly, I led a practice focused on indoor GIS, dealing a lot with facilities management, asset management, security use cases. And presently, I am the director for an applied research lab for the built environment at Esri. And that's a little bit about my background. And I'm trying to remember how I got looped into this, Fred. I think it all began with some LinkedIn post, and the next thing you know, I was fully entwined in this effort. But I've enjoyed it.
Thank you, Patrick. That's great to hear. Well, let's start this presentation then. My name is Fred Kloet, being the chair for the project team. The project team of the facility management and openBIM project, and this is our update spring 2022. This is a good moment to update everybody, and it allows us to present our work so far. The work groups where Patrick is leading one of the 5 have finished their contents, and they have been delivered to the buildingSMART International team. And in this presentation, we are going to explain the process we've done so far and what we are going to do next. Also in the project team are the other members as mentioned here. And when you receive the presentation, you can click on the hyperlinks. buildingSMART International Benelux, BIM Connected House of Commons, which is Suzanne Kienle's side, and 2 people from the ISO 267, namely the chair of the ISO TC7, Duncan Waddle, and one of the conveners, work group conveners, Gordon Mitchell, for the FM technology one. The ISO TC267 is the entry point for the ISO 41000. Then there's the PureNet people, all the public real estate agencies across Europe, represented in the first phase by Stadspeak, which you can also see is one of the funding partners we had, and we want to thank them again for supporting us. Then there's Global FM. It's the Association of Facility Managers across the globe. And it's association of associations, so they represent associations from Australia, Brazil, America, Europe, Asia. And they will be distributing all of our 5 white papers across the globe. And a big thank them for that as well. Then there's the IFMA IT community. IFMA stands for International Facility Management Association. And Daniel Stonecipher is in our project team representing the IFMA IT community, who has also been dealing with the BIM subject for a long time already. Then there's Facility Management Netherlands, which was the original initiator of this project. Microsoft Real Estate and Security, Sella Eckhart has been participating in the project team. Simon Ashworth, a professor doctor of the Zurich Hochschule für Facility Management. Ryan Tennyson of the Scottish Futures Trust. Hans Hendricks of the BIM Specialist. And Hans is the one that co-led the space management at universities work group together with Patrick Wallis. Now let's go into the presentation itself. The original slide that you see also is the same as last year because it is a good overview on where we come from. It's an initiative from the FM world itself, from what I used to say the use phase after the handover, the ones that can be seen as the clients of the construction industry, regarding buildings. That's why we are in the building room with our project. The facility management is defined in this way: organizational function which integrates people, place, and process within the built environment with the purpose of improving the quality of life of people and the productivity of the core business. Now, this is the official ISO 41000 standard. Meaning that place, which is one of the subjects of the work groups we had, namely space, but place and space, they are very strongly connected, of course. The business case has 2 significant points, namely the failure costs that we have within facility management. And just like the construction industry, over the years, we managed to get grip of the failure costs. We didn't get rid of the failure cost, but we organized processes to manage the failures. And of course, this has been also a business case for providers that can help us doing that. And it's around 10 to 15% per workplace per year, and mainly because of lack of information, having to search for information, having to manually update information, working with CAD drawings instead of database and linked data models. So there is still a lot to win here per square meter. Meaning there is a business case for investing in openBIM. And at the bottom side, there is also the increase real estate value by 2%. We've asked these questions to surveyors, and they told us, well, if you do in the use phase, if you have facility management, update the BIM model with the right geometry and data of assets and objects and the built environment, everything, it can increase the real estate value by 2%. Now you see here place in square meters and geometry put in yellow. And maybe Patrick, this is also subject to your working group. Can you maybe tell us a little bit about how your work group looked at these particular words, these particular subjects, place, square meters, and geometry?
Sure. I mean, some of the notes I made, like when Jeff was talking earlier, I thought it was an interesting joining in terms of the order of the presentation, because there are some similarities and kind of where these different groups wound up. So one thing I would point out is that facilities management has never ever been about just buildings, right? It's about buildings, the connective tissue in between, the above, the below, the in between, right? And place and space, they connotate an idea of activity. They connotate a history of human action in that place, right? So in that sense, we are looking at spaces that are entwined with a business process, right? And that's what drives the meaning. Like, why does it even exist? Why is it even there? So in that sense, that drove us back to looking at the ISO 19650 as a guiding document in terms of getting back to defining what the organizational information requirements were, the kind of reason for being for these facilities, and then being able to move from there to get to what the asset information requirements were. In our case, we use that as a framework to create what we called space information requirements, right? And then in our minds, space information requirements, they could be related to, you can think of them as the form and the proposed content of a CDE, right? And in my world, like where I work, I'd otherwise think of a CDE as the definition of an information product, right? Something that an end user can use to answer specific questions about what is happening, what has happened, what is likely to happen, so they can get their job done. I could ramble on, Fred, but I think that's a good description.
This is a good example of what we want to do in this presentation, to have you represent the space management work group and show the people what you've done with your work group, because it's an example of all 5 work groups leading to the results there. Thank you. Let's continue with the presentation. So there are 3 deliverables, 3 draft ISO standards to be delivered to the Technical Committee 267, which is the Facility Management Information Requirement Standard based on the ISO 41000 series. Then there's the Facility Management Information Delivery Specification and/or Manual Standard. And it will make automation of handover, transfer, and revision of data and geometry more accessible for FM. And in the first presentation with Jeff and Ines, you heard more about the handover strategy there. And then there's the Facility Management Common Data Environment Standard that will help increase real estate by 2%, bringing down the FM failure cost by 5%. That's what we set at the deliverable, and simplify these FM services processes. Now below you see the official buildingSMART International Standards governance process. And we are at the moment in this red dot working in the development phase. And in this phase, after that comes the expert panel for the output check. And then it goes to this dot here. And this is all being put in the fully approved detailed project plan that you can download as a member from the website. even non-members can download it from the building room website. But members can also go into the document management system of the ESI called Box and go into this project and look at all the documents that we produce. As said, 5 work groups delivered content for 5 industry insight papers, and these 5 will be the basis for the FM and openBIM golden thread. So currently, the buildingSMART International team is handling the content and putting it into the official publications by buildingSMART International. But that also means that going and following the official governance, the standards governance of buildingSMART, it has to go first to the building room steering committee. So John has already delivered them to the building room steering committee to allow for feedback, to allow for discussion, to allow for approval, which is good because this means that there will be an official publication by buildingSMART International on facility management subjects. It takes a couple of weeks extra. At the moment, we are 2 months behind our schedule, but we chose for quality instead of speed, meaning that we have only one chance, one opportunity to perfectly match, to perfectly connect the FM industry worldwide with the buildingSMART International standards, while taking the ISO TC 267, ISO 41000 on board as well. We wish to thank all these people mentioned here that worked in the 5 work groups. And you can contact them if you like to ask them more detailed information about the work group and what they delivered. And the 5 industry insight papers will be published in April. So please keep an eye on the buildingSMART International newsletters and websites because they will all be published in April. Also in April, as it says here, we will start writing the FM and openBIM golden thread. And you can see in the model on the right-hand side that is a second project, a second phase of the all-over project, where we still have checks of experts and project team approvals, we call it. So there will still be lots of work to do. But before we go into that future work, I want first to invite Patrick again and explain in more detail about his own work group and what they've done and how they came to the results mentioned over here. Patrick.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks again, Fred. So where to start? I think it'd be best to start where we started, where we decided that, as a working group, we would take a consultative approach to developing the recommendations. And what does that even mean? Well, what it means as, work coming from a professional services organization at a software company, it means that we listen to the need of the customer, right? And we use that to define requirements, right? To build user stories and then, develop technology tasks to meet those requirements. The result would be an information product, software plus content given to the right people as part of a business process at the right time to do what it is that they're trying to do, whatever that is, right? So we looked collectively at our experience, working with customers and even our own personal experience coming from industry. Like before I was in my current job, I was an asset manager in the Coast Guard, right? Managing a pretty large portfolio. So we all had our own personal experiences at work in this industry, and through our current work, whether at a university or at a software company. So that's where we began. And using that approach, we actually found this affinity with the ISO 19650 standard, which I alluded to earlier. And if you're familiar with that document, you can already see parallels in what I described as this consultative approach. Like, we're not going to build technology for the sake of building technology. We're going to build it to meet specific needs. And the needs defined here were around space management. And so we really liked what we saw in that standard, being able to define the organization's requirements. And then an aha moment for me personally, because I had not been involved with buildingSMART for 10 plus years, right? So what I noticed is that things had changed quite a bit for the good, and in my mind it was really a shift from a noun to a verb in BIM. So instead of like thinking building information model, as only this 3D object model, it became a verb, right? It became a process. And if you think about it that way, it's fascinating and useful at the same time. So in the 19650 describes that process, right? How do we get from organizational requirements to providing an actual exchange information requirement? And so that's the path that we followed. And what we wound up doing is we wound up actually taking specific examples at a university, and we looked, particularly at Coventry University, and we also looked at Tufts University here in the U.S. Specifically, and we described, like, using that process. Here's how you would build an exchange information requirement. So we wound up describing, okay, well, here's how you do it. Here's the tools that you would need to collect these organizational requirements, move from individual building models to an aggregated asset information model, right? So that's a big shift, right? It's not about a specific building model per se. It's about how do I aggregate all these data, right, to meet the needs of the organization that I had previously defined. And the shape of that is different for every organization. Every organization has a different level of technological maturity. So that's another thing that we liked about the ISO 19650 and how it describes the creation of a CDE, right? It really reflects that reality. So we wound up, heading in that direction, and like I said, illustrating how you would build an exchange information requirement using that process. And I do think, like what Jeff was saying, there could be a core, right? Like I do think there could be a core, that runs across all these various use cases. But at the same time, we have to realize that these organizations are at different levels of technological maturity, and whatever we do needs to reflect that and support that, right? And support them moving from one step to another, right? As they climb up the mountain of technological progress. So.
All right, Patrick. Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to add one thing. Within our project, we have the Penn State University. And some of you might know John Messner and his colleague called Zara Gorbani. And based on the work Patrick has been doing with his work group, Sarah and Penn State got interested in creating a global university community around this subject of space and area measurement. So if anybody in the audience from a university is interested in creating and helping us creating this global community for universities on this subject, please let Patrick or me know, and together with Zara Gorbani, we will initiate this community. So that's good news also for this work group, for the results. And now let me show you some of the results of the other work groups. We had a work group, Asset Maintenance for Hospitals. And in this work group, there was specific attention for the business case. They made a description of what clients need to deliver better outcomes for asset management in hospitals. And also there was a focus on answering how to update the models with the latest FM attribute data for proactive maintenance purposes. So you can look at them in English. They say these are use cases, and they address these use cases and in detail described the information requirements to implement these use cases. They looked also at the failure costs examples. What failure costs are there for clients, for hospital FM managers, and for the providers they hire, like cleaning companies or like maintenance companies. They written down an advice on connection and usage of the GS1 and SFG20 standards. As we all know, GS1 is also a partner of buildingSMART International. So that's a very interesting position here. And the GS1 standard also got mentioned in 2 of the other work groups. So there seems to be something that could be interesting to include in the golden thread around the GS1 facility management integration, interoperability or classification. They also looked at the opportunity to facilitate clinical staff and patients with navigation, occupation, and track and trace opportunities, which also leads back into Patrick's work group, of course. And here you see one of the objectives that has been met, namely that sometimes the outcomes of one work group can be used in another work group, meaning the golden thread can address both and can apply to more than just one industry or domain. So especially in the universities and hospitals, you see that sometimes there is an academic hospital, a university hospital, where both are necessary. Again, this group wrote down something to navigate the ISO 55 for asset management, 55,000, ISO 9650, and ISO 41000. So they looked into that. How can we connect those ISO standards? And this is, as said, all input for the FM and openBIM golden thread. The business catering work group, they made a choice for a specific design-oriented approach. And that's because they discovered there was a huge group of 1,500 members, an association with 1,500 members called the FCSI. And they had already done a lot of work focusing on buildingSMART international standards. And they put it down on the website, everything they did. If it's on the right-hand bottom, ifsabim.org, and you can download lots of documents there. And all these documents have been checked by buildingSMART international people, like Andrea Aiello from ACCA. And based on that, the group decided to completely focus on how can we integrate all of this kitchen equipment into the buildingSMART international standards like the BSDD, the IFC classes, and how can we use that for doing maintenance? Because for company use cases such as Starbucks, it's very important that if one of the coffee machines breaks down, that somewhere at the headquarters, all the data of that specific coffee machine, the providers that have to do the reparation, repair, etc. It's with the click of a mouse, and it's not an Excel sheet that needs to be updated before anybody can do anything. And this is also one of the things that could be important for kitchens in hospitals, because here you see that the design of kitchens also can be connected to menus, to health of people, which is one of the major objectives of the ISO 41000, the health of people. Then there was the workplaces work group, specifically for the public government real estate, how to connect them. The results here were how openBIM-based asset management can help delivering efficient workplace management. And specifically the second one, that results box down below, says creating clarity on why real estate organizations should adopt BIM as a tactical tool in their digital core. As we all know, this is one of the major business cases. Why should they do that and take it in their digital core? So not just as an application or site application, but use it from the start. Again, the connections between different standards here and the PDCA cycle, plan, do, check, act, the Deming cycle, I think it's called as well. Failure costs and the benefits of using openBIM by clients and workplace providers. So here again, we try to make the connection with the OFML standards, the tables and chairs objects that have already been designed and when you say that, modeled in 3D by the furniture industry, and that could also be an opportunity to include them in the BSDD, like the kitchen equipment. And finally, the cleaning of airports was led by Alexander Warp, who also was before in the airport room steering committee. So here there were several airports participating. We were in good contacts with Denver and Vienna and Auckland, and Carl Fitzpatrick did a lot on this work group as well. Also, the Schiphol Airport themselves participated, and they wondered, how do you say that? They were surprised by the financial value of cleaning at airports, being the biggest cost within the airport related to real estate and facility management, because of the 24/7, 365 days a year cleaning of airports. They were identifying similarities in information requirements for asset management models and cleaning operations. So there's a fit, a connection there too that can be made. And they have addressed the need and opportunities for FM, openBIM, the IDM, and the creation of the FMCDE. So they were very specific here in how can we use the existing knowledge and have the cleaning objectives serviced by them. Having said all of that, the next step is writing the FM and openBIM golden thread. On the right-hand side, at the top, you see the model that we're using right from the start, the 5 work groups answering the question, what do FMs need from BIM? Then the 5, we call them white papers, but now they are industry insight papers, delivering the information to write the golden thread. But we also align them with the BSI standards developments and the ISO TC 267 activities. The BSI standard developments like IFC, OpenCDE, BSDD, the airport room activities, the technical room activities, etc. So in this step, we will be answering the questions: what are the FM asset information requirements, using the industry insight papers as the resource, as the source of information. When and how to create, deliver, and hand over FM information. Jeff and Ines already have done some work there, so we can use that as well. And what is needed to create and manage an FM common data environment. Well, also today we've heard a lot about the OpenCDE developments within buildingSMART International. So we also see some good connections to be made there, because FM, of course, is an application, to put it simple, a client, a use case. And now in this phase, we're going to the technical part and how to connect FM with the buildingSMART activities. So the question to be answered there is how to best create a flow of information serving FM objectives defined in the ISO 41000. For this specific phase, which we start right now, we need input and experts. So anybody wishing to participate in this, please step forward and let us know what you want to do. Normally, we also agreed with everybody on the work groups. We expect you to work for 2 hours per week on this, depending, of course, on how many people we can get and how many funding and sponsorship we can get. But 2 hours per week is the average. Then the planning, publication and global distribution of 5 papers, April, as explained. Writing of the golden thread, also April, and funding of the project, the second phase of the project, also April. So April will be a busy month for us. We need approximately 75,000 euros to hire the expert to do the actual writing of the draft ISO standards, because that's what we're going to do next, starting May. And we need, of course, some money to manage the project, to have the buildingSMART International team support us, etc. And our objective still is to deliver the ISO standards Q1 2023. Having said all of that, I first want to ask Patrick. Patrick, from your experience with how this project worked so far, what would you like to say to the audience about the way we collaborate in this project? So if people are interested, if people are interested in maybe even funding and sponsoring this project, what would you suggest to do? What would be your advice?
Well, I mean, I would say, you could be like me, you see the call to action, in social media, and you reach out. At Esri, we're lucky we have a part of the organization that's connected closely to buildingSMART, so I was able to get plugged in pretty quickly. The experience itself, I'd have to say only positive, right? The ability to meet experts from around the world, looking, perhaps at the same things that you're looking at, able to confirm some of the things that you've been thinking for a long time, or even bringing to you new ideas that you hadn't yet contemplated. So all in all, it's a great experience, a great learning experience, even if you've been in the industry for a really long time, right? I've been 20 plus years at this point, and I feel like I learned a lot. So, reach out, directly to this group, or work through the organization that you're at that's already connected. How's that, Fred? Is that a good plug?
Yeah. The only thing I want to add to that is that we need as many experts and people from the facility management side of this world. And people often underestimate their knowledge of facility management. Like, for example, with maintenance, it's a good example, or with space. Also, the space subject is already heavily connected within the real estate world, for example. It's heavily connected with what the TC59, for example.
Right.
So people are much more connected with facility management than they often think.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great point. I mean, I recommend continuing, the dialogue with organizations like IFMA, other organizations like Kornet, that are going to get this body to where we want to be. Right? They've been looking at this for a long time. They've been thinking about how to organize their data to meet day-to-day enterprise business needs for facilities, for space, and more. So, I mean, that's going to be the key, right? If it makes sense to them, it's going to work. If it doesn't, it's not going to work.
Exactly. And we've got this huge opportunity now to bring it all together. John, I think if you have any questions from the audience.
Yes, if there are any questions or comments that anyone wishes to raise, please do so now. There's one from Richard Kelly here, just saying thank you to yourselves, Fred and Patrick, for and the extended work group teams that you talked about. The industry insight papers, the 5 that have been produced, will be published, as you said, in April, very shortly now. They are important insights into user requirements from experienced people from the industry. We still have Ines, and we have David Ivy, the co-chair of the Building Room Steering Committee, with us. I'd like to invite you both to join at this point. Please do so. See, Ines is there. Hi, Ines. David, if you are able to join us, then do turn your camera on and unmute. Kelly came back, just to let you know, Ines, and was still interested. In fact, I think probably was interested in what Patrick and Fred have been presented as well. So thank you, Kelly. We'll reach out to you separately on email. David, is it worth responding to what? Welcome to the session, by the way, David.
Thank you.
Is it worth responding to what Fred was saying in his presentation earlier about the 5 papers going to the Building Room Steering Committee?
I think it's. I guess all I would add is that it's kind of an exciting, I think, time for FM. It's one of those issues that I feel like has been kind of in the forefront of our minds, at least on the steering committee, for a long time. And now to have so much stuff coming through, I think it's only going to help the industry. So, and we see calls for it all the time. I mean, it's becoming. I don't think that was terribly uncommon before, but I think people are really starting to feel the pressure and the need to have these tools. So I think it's going to be an exciting couple of years.
Yep, I think it will. Thank you. It's probably just worth emphasising. Fred made the point that for both these projects now, both the FM and openBIM and FM equipment handover maintenance projects, they're both at the stage where further funding is required for them to be able to move forwards into their next phases. I think, Fred, you put up on screen that something like €75,000 is required for some of the development work and the technical work that will come in the next phase. And Ines, I think there might be a larger sum required on the FM equipment handover project. I don't know if you.
Yeah, for our project, people can get a copy of the detailed project plan, and in there all the activities, it's all very transparent there to see.
I'm not sure if where previous monies come from, but it would be nice to see, you know, some of the, I think someone mentioned the U.S. organizations, IFMA and Cornet and stuff, step up and get interested in this.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, that would be good. Ines, is there anything you want to say about the funding for FM equipment maintenance?
Yes, of course. As Jeffrey was saying in his presentation, we are in the previous phase. We are not like the FM and openBIM project as advanced, and we need funding for the start of the project. So if anyone is interested, we're happy to speak to them and to give them more information about the project. You can also find it in the website of the project, and we're looking forward to working with you.
That's great. Thank you, Ines. And Richard Kelly kindly added in one of the comments, there are various ways to get in contact with us if you do wish to work on the projects that you've heard about today, or indeed are able to support financially these projects. The easiest way is to email us or go to the BSI website, and contact@buildingsmart.org is one of several emails that will work their way through to us. Rob's obviously been in the audience because Rob would like to say thank you for the updates. Rob is David's co-chair at the Building Room Steering Committee. We have no further comments or questions today, so I would like to thank our presenters. Thank you to Ines and Jeff. Thank you to Fred and Patrick. Thank you to David for joining us. This has been an excellent session. We have further building room sessions later in the week, including one that runs tomorrow at 4 p.m. Central European time. So please do join us. We look forward to seeing you again. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thanks, John.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you.